um, it can be something more positive, but people really have to study. I mean, Dr. King wrote 5 books. You know, a lot of our people haven't read any of his books, haven't read his writings, things like this. You know, we'll get to this breaking news story in a minute here if we want to. But the other thing is, you talked about millennials before we went off, right?
Yeah.
So back in October, I was a guest lecturer in the Department of Africology and African American Studies at Eastern Michigan University for the introductory Africology class, and the majority of the people in the class are African Americans. And unfortunately, so these are millennials, right? But they approach the class like it's a foreign language, like it's something entirely foreign to them. You know, I mean, you should get an A just for being black. You should get an A in this class just for being black. The questions that are asked, your hands should fly up. You should be enthralled to be in this class. It's about you.
Yes.
You know, they looked at it like it's a foreign language or something.
Now, wait a minute. That's an interesting thought, because if black folks in particular, but all Americans really, are misinformed, disinformed about Dr. King and his legacy, what does that say about where we are now and how these misperceptions affect what we think and what we do?
Well, your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results, okay? So we're operating within, oftentimes, the limited circumference of some people's awareness, so it shows that we have a lot of work to do. And your history and culture gives you your foundation, it gives you your VIPs, your values, your interests, and your principles. And it influences how you see the world, which cultural lens you see the world through. Unfortunately, most African Americans have been taught to see the world through the eyes of Europeans. So we have a lot of work to do. And this is why African American owned media and African American oriented media that tells the truth is so important as well.
Right. Is it more important that we focus on a Martin Luther King, on a Malcolm X, on a Marcus Garvey, folks who were not elected to office, but people who developed a grassroots following? They either had a religious background or had an organizational black background, and were able to build their movements from the ground up, as opposed to elected officials like a Donald Trump or anybody else who got put into the Congress or the White House.
Well, we can focus on both because, see, Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement put pressure on Lyndon Johnson. They put pressure on elected officials, okay? They helped to organize at the grassroots level. So that's very important. But we can also study somebody like John Conyers, number one. We can study somebody like a John Conyers who intersects with the Civil Rights Movement, okay? We can study someone like Harold Washington, okay? Chi-Town, mayor of Washington, mayor of Chicago, mayor of Chicago. So, and when you study Dr. King intersects with Malcolm X. Dr. King intersects with Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou worked with Dr. King and she worked with Malcolm X. Dr. King intersects with leaders of African nations, okay? So when you study Dr. King, it's a vast area, a vast subject matter that you're studying that takes you throughout different aspects of history.
Let me re-ask the question, because I've talked to a lot of folks, Michael Imhotep, who have said, you know, when you look at the true leaders that have emerged in the African-American community, they pretty much were not elected officials. You had a John Conyers. You had the congressman out of New York who was pretty influential. Abyssinian Church. Why am I not getting his name?
It's drawing a blank also.
It'll come to me.
Yeah, it comes to me.
But not elected officials. There are those who would even argue that a John Conyers became more prominent because of his association with the Civil Rights Movement and not vice versa. Do we put too much credence in elected officials and the electoral process?
Do we put too much credence in it? It has.
Every time we have problems, we say, we got to elect a new governor, we got to elect a new mayor, we need a better senator. But in fact, the real leadership historically that has been demonstrated in our community tend to come from people who were not in elected office.
Well, those people oftentimes were pushing elected officials. See, that's the other thing. So oftentimes we don't understand the power that we really have. So they were, when you study the civil rights movement, they were pushing for a Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65. They were pushing for desegregation, the Birmingham Campaign of 1963, to break down the barriers of segregation. They were putting pressure on elected officials at a local level and a national level, even though they were not elected officials themselves. So you need both of them, but they both intersect with with our history as well.
And by the way, Adam Clayton Powell.
Adam Clayton Powell
is the name that I was trying to think of.
Adam Clayton Powell.
Yeah. We do have callers on the line. We got Manza on line 1. Hey, Manza, thanks for calling. Good afternoon to you. You are on with Michael Imhotep. I'm waiting for our engineer to push up Manza on line 1 so we can talk to Manza. And there we go. Manza, thanks for calling. You're on with Michael Imhotep and Cliff Russell. How are you? Hello, Manza. Are you with us? Are they pulled up on the board? Yes, we finally got it right. Manza, you're with us. Thank you.
Well, I understand technological stuff like that. Okay, but when it happens,
Thank you.
Thanks for taking my call. A direct answer: do we put too much faith in the elected officials? My direct answer is yes. That was your last question.
Yes.
But dealing with this whole thing that's going on right now.
Wait. Before you go further, Manza, I'd like to get an explanation. If you agree that we put too much faith in elected officials, why do you think that's true? And turn down your radio if that's what I hear in the background.
No. I just I'm on speakerphone, but I don't have a radio on.
Okay, if you can come off a speakerphone, we can hear you a lot clearer.
I'll do that.
Oh my goodness, much better. Yes, you sound much better, Manza.
With a live and in color.